Welcome to Brother Miller's Notes. This is really take 2 for 2 Nephi chapter 18. I had 2 ways I wanted to present this, and I couldn't decide which way to do it, so I just did 2 videos. I'm not a historian. I'm a fan of history. I think maybe I'm a little bit like Dan Carlin. He's one of my favorite podcasters. And as I study history, there's one thing that I often struggle with. As I look at history and I see people making decisions, I think, why don't you look at what you're doing? Can't you see? Because I can see what's going on because I have the advantage of history. But these people live in their present. They don't have the same advantages that you and I'd have. They see things, well, with their today. They don't know about their tomorrow, and sometimes they make their best decisions. And sometimes they're convoluted. We look back at it and go, what are you thinking? An example of that really for me comes from the play Hamilton. Now, sorry for those of you who are in Great Britain. Hamilton is a musical, and in this, the character is King George III of the United Kingdom. And he sings this, and at first it seems so wonderful, so lovely, and then becomes so weird. He sings, "You'll be back, like before. I'll fight the fight and win the war. For your love, for your grace. And I'll love you till my dying days. When you're gone, I'll go mad. Don't throw away this thing we've had." Okay, at this point, I'm thinking, this is just so lovely. Then he adds, "'Cause when push comes to shove, I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love." Wouldn't it have been nice if King George III had someone that could say, look, here's what's going to happen in the future. In the end, Great Britain and the United States, they're going to be pretty good friends. Maybe you should just let them go. Let them become their own country, do their own thing. But, like the leaders of his time, he doesn't have that vantage. For Isaiah, he has told King Ahaz, don't make a confederacy. Things will not turn out well. It seems that Ahaz has ignored that advice. And so Isaiah gets his son, and his son has a very unique name, which means to speed to the spoil, he hasteneth the prey. His son is a living object lesson. Come here, son, Maher, Sha'al, Hasbaz. Come with me, and we're going to go let you be an object lesson. Because when this child is born, there's a timeline between where things are going to go so wrong because of Ahaz's choice to make a confederacy. Before that son has the chance, the knowledge to cry, not my daddy and mommy, but my father and my mother. So take a pen, kind of a commons man pen, write on a scroll, take 2 witnesses that it doesn't seem that they're really in Isaiah's camp, so there's no everybody can go back and go, oh yeah, you had 2 of your cronies, they wrote this out, and you made it all up, and you're writing now a little bit later and saying you really wrote it and said it was history. Really, these are people who don't seem to like Isaiah, not in his camp, and they are witnesses. They're going to be faithful. Isaiah really said this. So within 2 to 3 years, things are going to happen, and the king of Assyria is going to come, and Israel, the northern kingdoms, are going to be taken away. So in 734, Tiglath-Pileser marched through Israel and Philistia to the Egyptian border and cut off any potential aid from the Egyptians. The next year, 733, Israel lost the Galilee and the Transjordan area. Damascus falls to Assyria the next year in 732, and Isaiah's prophecy was fulfilled. Now these armies that come, Isaiah describes them. The armies of Assyria are like the waters of the river, strong and many, and the king of Assyria in all his glory, he shall come up over all his channels and over all his banks. He shall pass through Judah, and he shall overflow and go over. He shall reach even to the neck, and the stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land. He's going to be like floodwaters. He is going to be, it's like floodwaters, dangerous, fast-flowing, over their banks, unpredictable, full of mud. And it's going to go to the neck. The prophecy is he's going to get all the way eventually to Jerusalem. See, Assyria was the superpower of their day. For Assyria, they honed their military and had a lot of skill. They had chariots, and for Assyria, they're often aided by their god Ashur. You can see him at the top of this figure, just right here, flying, aiding, and kind of directing the work of the king of Assyria. Matter of fact, for them, it was a mandate that Ashur had given them, that they should be not conquering the world, but spreading his gospel, spreading his word. And when they would come and spread that, really military power, they were dominant. The superpower would come and crush whatever was in their way. One Assyrian king was at war at least 31 out of the 35 years of his reign. They would go out and they became really addicted to the loot that they would get. And they were vicious. If you would say, hey, here, hand me some earth, pretend like you're our subjects, we pretend or not, you give us what you want, what we want, and we'll leave you alone. But if you say no, and as soon as those troops of Assyria are coming up against your walls, as soon as there's a siege on, all bets are off, and we will do whatever we want to do. They make it really kind of a little bit of, this is their pictures. And in their embassies, they'd have pictures of, here's what we did to a city that chose not to give in to us. You can see that they have siege engines that are coming up against the walls. Even though these walls are fortified in this city, you have always the Assyrians are coming through. It is members of the place where they're attacking that is being killed. They're always in defeat. The Assyrians are always powerful, overcoming. They're always larger than life, always bows coming. And if you are caught as a rebel, your fate was really going to be ignominious. For them, they thought this was a fitting punishment. This type of punishment was viewed as the rightful chastisement of a rebellious subject and was practiced specifically to dissuade opposition to Assyrian rule by setting an example from which other potential rebels should draw the appropriate conclusions. In other words, they were state-sponsored terrorists. And you'd better learn from what other people's disasters. Thus, the purpose of this policy was psychological, its principal object being to engender terror so as to convey a sense of powerlessness in the face of Assyrian arms. And sometimes you think, okay, they're terrorists, state-sponsored terrorists. But did they do it just to keep a large area of land in check? Well, it seems at times that they enjoyed it too. Here's a picture of a relief of one of the kings that's found at the Nineveh palace. You can see the Assyrian king having dinner with his wife. They're celebrating. They got the food. He's on in the palace on his chair, on his throne. However, the Elamite king's head is hanging in the tree. He had rebelled against them, and the king had gone out and taken it, and so now they're enjoying their supper and looking on the Elamite king's head. He wasn't just there to die in battle, but he wanted the trophy and to be able to see it in his room. And I often think about, what does this mean with the human capital? You have this type of famed Assyrian army coming your way. What do? I imagine the vast majority of the people would want to flee, whether they did or not. But there'd be a flood of refugees coming your way. And you get the sense of that as the Assyrian army approaches. Now I'm going to show you quite a few other pictures. Really, these next few reliefs come from the siege of Lachish as an Assyrian king is on his way to Jerusalem. This starts off with just having a nice, neat, orderly camp. You can see there's a highway right down the middle of the camp. And in the camp, before Lachish is sieged, you see as the battle starts, you see those of the Assyrian army ready and able to cast slings, rocks, arrows, fling arrows. They have their round shields. They have long swords. Now, comes from 701 BCE, but these came out of what would modern day was Nineveh, modern day Mosul. Here is the siege, kind of the storyline. And you can see a lot of things, but I'm just going to point a few things out. There is the siege engine that's coming up. One of the things that people in the siege engine, you have one Assyrian soldier whose job is just in case they put down arrows that are with flames and try and burn the siege engine, his job is to get water and to make sure it doesn't start up. If you are one of the rebels, you usually are killed or impaled or brought before the king. Now, in the relief, it shows that the gates of Lachish are opened, and you have this family who are fleeing out before the Assyrian army starts the siege. Those rebels who were caught, were leaders, are flayed. After the siege is ended and the Assyrian army wins, you have families that are deported. For this, you have a cart that's being pulled by a bull. You have seems to be a dad who has a box over his shoulders. You got mom and some kids. And the Assyrian soldier is, I want to say, escorting them away. In part, maybe they may be a part of the booty, some end up slaves, but they also may be just a part of deportees. It was Assyrian practice to deport some to other areas of the empire to maybe take away, maybe not troublemakers, but if you deport some, the rest of the population seems to be a little bit more, less likely to rebel, is what their hope was, between that and really ruling through terror. Now, the whole time, the king is on his throne, and he's watching it. You can kind of see that in this relief, he's on his throne, and this is his general who oversees the operations. And up above is inscribed Sennacherib, the king of the world, king of Assyria, sat on a throne, and the booty of Lachish passed before him. Now, as a side note, after Nineveh is taken captive, it seems that the conquering army went through and desecrated every single one of these and just chiseled out the faces of all the Assyrian kings. So now back to Isaiah and Ahaz. Isaiah is saying, look, here's what's coming. Ahaz, as a ruler, a king, is ignoring what Isaiah is saying. So Isaiah takes his whole case to the people. And he tells the people, look, even though your king might not be what he should be, in this case, he's not listening to what God would say. Isaiah says to the people, you still have a choice. You have a choice to choose between the waters of Shiloh, which are soft and gentle and refreshing and clean, or like the waters of the river that the Assyrians are going to be like, running over the bounds. They're dirty, they're dangerous, they're high, they're floodwaters, they're unpredictable. You once again have a choice. You can choose to have God be with you, or if you reject God's words, what you say, it doesn't matter because it won't stand. Isaiah is teaching them, okay, you can choose between not to walk in the way of the people who are following Ahaz. They're looking after themselves. They don't have God in them. Or, okay, you can just be one of the crowd. Follow what everybody else is doing, whether they're doing it righteously or not. You can choose not to fear their fears. With God, you don't need to be afraid. Or you can fear the fear that sometimes comes with being unrighteous. I'll just give you an example. When you lie, there is the fear of getting caught. There is the fear of distrust when someone else finds out. There is the need to be able to tell another lie, to keep that first lie a secret. There's always a fear, even in your own conscience, when you ignore what God says. For Isaiah, once again, another thing you can choose, to choose God and have a sanctuary in God, or you can have a stone of stumbling. You can have a rock of offense. You can have a gin and a snare. These are things you catch yourself in. You can be caught in a trap of your own making. You can stumble and fall. Or you can have a sanctuary. You can choose the attitude that I will wait on the Lord. I will look for him, which literally translated is I will hope for him. Or you can not look for him, and you can look, seek unto them have familiar spirits, under wizards that peep and mutter. It seems back then that they would get people who were not necromancers, maybe that is the right word, but they would be charlatans, and they would try and throw their voices to say, here's a voice, and you can see it projecting from a rock, and that's really the voice of, and they'd say a spirit. It's ventriloquism. You can choose to have a light in you, the light of God, the light of Christ, or not have that light in you. You can choose to be with Christ or without Christ. So for Isaiah, it's very simple. You need to bind up the testimony and seal the law among the disciples. To seal is to attest as a final, to close up. To bind is to wrap up, to safeguard from tampering. So maybe when your leader's a little bit like Ahaz, and I don't know, maybe sometimes we complain a little bit too much about our leaders. I think most of the leaders that I've ever known start off being, they want to do good. And I think we're very blessed to have some leaders we do. But when our leaders choose not to follow God, maybe they don't have the faith. We can choose between the soft waters of Shiloh, or Christ, and the flood waters of sin. We should not walk the walk of the unfaithful, but have hope. Those who are on the Lord's errand look for opportunities to build faith in Jesus Christ and deepen the conversion of his disciples. Our ministry is to attest to or become a witness to the law of the gospel. Testimonies of Christ and the gospel lead us to a sanctuary where we can draw closer to God and deepen our relationship with him. One day, maybe our future scholars will look back on us and say, why didn't they just see what was coming? Maybe like in Isaiah's time, maybe we've got good leaders, maybe we don't. But today we can choose to have the peaceable things of God in our lives, to have him a sanctuary for us. Hey, thanks for spending some time with me today. I know this is a little bit longer. My son always tells me, keep it 10 minutes, Dad. I'm a little older too, I guess. But have a great day.